If you think the smiling, white-haired grandpa printed on your fried chicken bucket was just a sweet, persistent old man who chased his dreams, you have been thoroughly brainwashed by corporate billboards. The real Harland Sanders was not a gentle soul. He was a foul-mouthed, hot-tempered brawler who once literally got into a deadly shootout with a business rival over a gas station sign. He spent his whole life failing, finally struck gold in his 60s with a franchise empire, only to be swindled out of his life's work at age 74 by a couple of Wall Street suits for a mere $2 million. Today, we are tearing off the public relations wrapping paper of the Kentucky Fried Chicken fairy tale. Let us look at the brutal capitalist plunder and human tragedy hiding behind this so-called inspiring American dream. Buckle up. This is not the chicken dinner your mother served you. This is a story of violence, betrayal, and the cold mechanics of wealth transfer. This is the story they never put on the bucket. Chapter 1. Not bad luck, but a natural-born brawler. Stop believing the narrative that his first 40 years were just bad luck. The media loves to paint Sanders as a sympathetic underdog who simply could not catch a break. That is a lie. It is a comforting lie, but a lie nonetheless. The truth is far uglier and far more interesting. Harland Sanders was born in 1890 in a small farmhouse in Henryville, Indiana. His father died when he was 5 years old, leaving his mother to work 16-hour days in a cannery. Young Harland had to learn to cook for his younger siblings. He burned the food often. He made mistakes constantly, but he kept trying. That part of the story is true. But what the biographies leave out is the temper, the rage, the absolute refusal to back down from any fight, no matter how small or how foolish. He was kicked out of the army. Technically, he lied about his age to enlist at 16, served for a few months in Cuba, and then was discharged after a military transport ship ran aground. But the pattern was already forming. He could not follow orders. He could not keep his mouth shut. He could not accept authority. His first wife, Josephine, left him after years of struggling to live with his explosive personality. She packed her bags, took their daughter, and walked out. Sanders never really got over it. He literally brawled with his own client in court while working as a lawyer. Imagine that scene. A lawyer, in a courtroom, under the gaze of a judge, fist-fighting the very person he was supposed to represent. That is not a man with bad luck. That is a man with a serious anger management problem. He got into fistfights with his bosses. He was fired from the railroad for insubordination after arguing with a supervisor about a scheduling conflict. He was fired from the ferry boat company for fighting with a coworker over who had seniority. He was fired from the insurance business for arguing with a policyholder who refused to pay. His early failures were almost entirely due to his explosive, violent temper. This was not a kindly grandpa. This was a Wild West outlaw with a short fuse and a long memory. Let us go back to the moment that defines his true character more than any other. It was 1920, and Sanders was running a gas station in Nicholasville, Kentucky. He was 29 years old, full of vinegar, and already tired of losing. He had a large billboard sign advertising his station. Across the street, a rival named Matt Stewart opened another gas station. Stewart was no angel either. He had a temper of his own. One day, Stewart decided to paint over Sanders' billboard. He climbed a ladder, brush in hand, and started covering Sanders' name with his own. Most businessmen would have filed a complaint with the local authorities. They would have called a lawyer. They would have written a strongly worded letter. Not Sanders. He grabbed a gun, walked across the street, and confronted Stewart. Words were exchanged. Insults were hurled. Stewart refused to stop painting. Sanders fired a warning shot. Stewart kept painting. Sanders fired again. This time, the bullet hit Stewart in the arm. The rival fell off the ladder, bleeding, screaming. Sanders was arrested and charged with assault. He spent weeks in jail before the case was eventually dismissed on a technicality. The story spread through the small town like wildfire. Think about that for a second. The face of one of the world's most beloved fast food brands once stood in the middle of a dusty Kentucky road, firing bullets at another man over a sign. This is not the story of a patient, gentle dreamer. This is the story of a man who would rather die than lose, who would rather risk prison than admit defeat, who would rather face a judge than back down from a fight. But here is the savage irony that no motivational speaker will ever tell you. It was exactly this reckless thug energy that kept him alive during the Great Depression. While other businesses collapsed around him, while other men lost their homes and their hope and their will to live, Sanders fought, screamed, and clawed his way through every crisis. His restaurant on the side of the road became a destination because he poured every ounce of his furious personality into it. He insulted customers who complained, and somehow they loved him for it. He threw out men who disrespected his waitresses. He once chased a thief down a highway with a cast-iron skillet in his hand, screaming obscenities. He was not a businessman. He was a force of nature. And in the 1930s, when the entire American economy was on its knees, a force of nature was exactly what it took to survive. He did not succeed because he was nice. He succeeded because he was too angry to quit. He succeeded because he had been knocked down so many times that getting back up was the only thing he knew how to do. He succeeded because failure had become as familiar to him as breathing. Hearing about his explosive temper, do you think personality is the only thing that determines destiny? Or does the raw, ugly, uncomfortable truth suggest that the unsure accumulation of wealth sometimes requires a little bit of ruthlessness, a little bit of violence, a little bit of madness? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely want to hear what you think. Chapter 2. The Truth Behind 1009 Rejections. A Brutal B2B Hustle. By the time the 1950s arrived, Sanders was already 60 years old. He had spent decades building a successful roadside restaurant in Corbin, Kentucky. Travelers on Route 25 knew his food. His fried chicken, cooked in a pressure fryer he designed himself after years of experimentation, was unlike anything else on the market. It was fast. It was juicy. It was consistent. It was delicious. He had a motel. He had a gas station. He had a reputation. But then the Interstate Highway System came. President Eisenhower signed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, and Route 25 died almost overnight. The cars stopped coming. The restaurant went bankrupt. The motel was foreclosed. The gas station was sold at auction. Sanders was 60 years old, broke, and staring at a Social Security check for $105 a month. He had nothing left except a secret recipe, a pressure fryer, and a furious unwillingness to accept defeat. The media loves this part of the story. They love to tell you that he lived on that tiny check and was rejected 1,009 times before finally succeeding. They turn it into a sermon about perseverance. Do not give up. Keep trying. Your breakthrough is just around the corner. It makes for great television. It sells books. It fills auditoriums with nodding heads and tearful eyes. But it is cheap chicken soup for the soul, and it completely misses the real business lesson. What Sanders was doing during those years was not some romantic quest for validation. He was not trying to prove a point to the universe. He was not seeking approval from a world that had rejected him. He was running a hardcore business-to-business model disruption, and he understood something that most entrepreneurs never figure out, even after decades in the game. He was not selling fried chicken. He was selling a franchise system. Let me say that again because it is the most important sentence in this entire chapter. He was not selling fried chicken. He was selling a franchise system. The chicken was just the excuse. The chicken was just the vehicle. The real product was a complete package. A secret recipe made from 11 herbs and spices. Though he always said there were more and kept the exact formula locked in his head, never written down, never trusted to paper. A pressure cooker technology that cut frying time from 30 minutes to 8. A revolutionary breakthrough that no one else had figured out yet. A training manual for kitchen staff, written in simple language so that anyone could follow it. A quality control checklist to ensure consistency across locations. And a profit-sharing royalty agreement that gave him a 5-cent cut of every piece sold, not a flat fee, not an upfront payment, but a percentage of every transaction, forever. He slept in his car, driving from town to town, eating cold beans from a can, washing in gas station bathrooms, not for a dream, but to survive in a dog-eat-dog world where no one was going to hand him anything. When he walked into a restaurant owner's kitchen, he did not beg. He did not plead. He did not share his sad story of bankruptcy and rejection and $105 Social Security checks. He demonstrated. He cooked his chicken for free, right there in their kitchen, using their equipment, their oil, their fire, their pots and pans. He let the owner taste it. He let the owner's wife taste it. He let the kitchen staff taste it. He let random customers taste it. And then he made an offer. You sell my chicken. You keep most of the profit. You pay me a 5-cent royalty for every piece sold. No upfront fee. No risk. If my chicken does not sell, if customers hate it, if you lose money, you owe me nothing. What is this? This is the earliest form of the software as a service model. This is equity via technology. This is profit sharing before profit sharing was cool. This is a zero-down, pay-as-you-go, performance-based partnership. He was not selling a product. He was selling a system. That distinction is the difference between dying a cook and dying a millionaire. That distinction is the difference between working for money and having money work for you. Those 1,009 rejections were not proof of his perseverance, though they certainly proved he had plenty of that. They were proof of his business model's initial friction. Every no taught him something. He refined his pitch. He adjusted his terms. He learned which restaurant owners were worth his time and which were not. He discovered that diners worked best because they already had the fryers. He discovered that small towns were easier to crack than big cities because word spread faster. He discovered that a handshake deal worked better than a written contract in the early days because it built trust. He discovered that restaurant owners were more willing to take a risk on something new if the downside was zero. By the time he finally got his first yes from a man named Pete Harmon in Salt Lake City, he had built a pitch so tight and a product so superior that the franchise practically sold itself. Harmon sold over $600,000 worth of fried chicken in his first year. The word spread like wildfire. Within 5 years, there were 400 KFC franchises across the United States and Canada. Within 10 years, the brand was international. This is the part the inspirational posters always leave out. Success did not come because he never gave up. Success came because he had a system worth buying, and he understood that selling the system was infinitely more profitable than selling the chicken. A cook sells a meal for $10 and makes $2 profit. A franchise seller sells 1,000 meals a day across 400 locations and collects a royalty on every single one. The math is not complicated, but the mindset shift is enormous. You see, even a bankrupt 60-year-old knew that selling a system is vastly superior to selling a product. He knew that his time was limited. He knew that his body was failing. He knew that he could not fry every piece of chicken himself forever. So he built a machine that would fry chicken for him, a machine made of contracts and royalties and other people's labor and other people's kitchens and other people's customers. That is not just hard work. That is leverage. That is intelligence. That is the difference between the working class and the owning class. If you are also sick of those toxic positivity videos that just tell you to never give up without ever explaining how the game actually works, hit the like button and keep watching. Because the real, bloody capitalist harvest is just about to begin. And Sanders, for all his brilliance, was about to become its next victim. Chapter 3: The Wall Street Heist. An empire bought for $2 million. Here is the history all those motivational videos are too scared to tell you. Here is the part they leave out of the chicken soup sermons. By 1964, Sanders was 74 years old. He had 400 franchise locations. He was making money. He was finally, undeniably, irreversibly successful. He was also exhausted. His health was failing. His heart was weak. His back ached constantly. His wife Claudia begged him to slow down. His children showed no interest in taking over the business. The empire he had built at an age when most men are already in rocking chairs was now too big for him to manage alone. And that is when the wolves arrived. Their names were John Y. Brown Jr. and Jack Massey. Let me introduce you to these men because they are the villains of this story, though they would never call themselves that. Brown was a young lawyer from Lexington, Kentucky. He was sharp, ambitious, and hungry. He had sharp teeth and a sharper mind. He had no interest in chicken. He had every interest in money. Massey was a financier who had already made a fortune in the pharmaceutical industry. He understood valuation, leverage, and the public markets better than Sanders ever would. He had been playing the game of high finance since Sanders was still washing dishes in a diner. Together, they saw what the old man could not see. KFC was not a chicken company. It was a printing press for money. The franchise model, once properly scaled and professionally managed, would generate royalties forever. Those 400 locations were just the beginning. They could be 4,000. They could be 40,000. The only limit was the number of hungry mouths in the world. And the number of hungry mouths was infinite. They approached Sanders with a smile and a check. $2 million. That was the number they put on the table. $2 million. Plus a lifetime salary of $40,000 per year. Plus the title of honorary board chairman. Plus a promise, whispered softly, that they would never change his recipe. To a 74-year-old man who had been broke most of his life, who had slept in his car, who had eaten rejection for breakfast more times than he could count, $2 million looked like the entire universe. It looked like safety. It looked like retirement. It looked like finally, after 7 decades of struggle, he could rest. He took the deal. He shook their hands. He posed for the photographs. He smiled for the cameras. He thought he had won. He had no idea that Brown and Massey would immediately take the company public. He had no idea that within a few years, their $2 million investment would be worth hundreds of millions. He had no idea that he had just sold a rocket ship for the price of a used bicycle. The initial public offering in 1966 valued KFC at over $30 million. 15 times what they paid for it. In 2 years, 15 times. Today, KFC is part of Yum Brands, a conglomerate worth over $30 billion. The old man's life work was nothing but a poker chip in a Wall Street financial game. He had built an empire with his bare hands, his furious temper, his sleepless nights, his 1,000-mile car trips, his 1,009 rejections, his gunfight, his fistfights, his bankruptcies, his divorces, his failures. And they had bought it for spare change. $2 million. In the grand scheme of what KFC would become, that was not even a rounding error. It was less than a rounding error. It was a joke. And the most painful part? They did it legally. They did it politely. They did it with a handshake and a contract that he signed with his own hand, sitting in his own living room, surrounded by his own family. There was no crime. There was no fraud. There was no gunfight, no fist fight, no courtroom brawl. Just a piece of paper and a number that looked big to a man who had never seen big numbers before. That is how capitalism eats its creators. Not with violence, with valuation. Not with enemies, with contracts. Not with anger, with math. Working your fingers to the bone for a lifetime, only to have the fruits of your labor casually plucked by those who understand capital. This is exactly why I created this channel. This is exactly why we tell these stories. If you do not understand the rules of business, your hard work just makes you someone else's crop to harvest. You are the farmer. They are the landowner. You till the soil. They own the harvest. If you refuse to be the prey, hit subscribe to AutoArchives right now. Let us upgrade your business intelligence together. Because the next chapter of this story is even darker. Chapter 4. A prisoner in a white suit. He sued his own company. You think his twilight years were happy and wealthy? You think he spent his final days counting his $2 million and smiling at his grandchildren, surrounded by love and respect and buckets of chicken? Dead wrong. The sale of KFC did not bring Sanders peace. It did not bring him joy. It brought him a new kind of prison, one made of contracts and public relations obligations and the slow, agonizing destruction of everything he had ever loved. After the takeover, Brown and Massey wasted no time maximizing profits. They were businessmen, not chicken men. They looked at the recipe and saw inefficiency. The original pressure fryer took 8 minutes. Why not shorten it to 6? The gravy required real drippings and hours of slow cooking, labor-intensive and expensive. Why not replace it with a powdered mix that only needed hot water and a quick stir? The 11 herbs and spices included some expensive ingredients that could be sourced cheaper elsewhere. Why not find cheaper substitutes? To Sanders, every change was a betrayal. Every shortcut was an insult. This was not business. This was sacrilege. He had spent decades perfecting that chicken. He had tasted failure 1,000 times before he got it right. He had given his whole life to that recipe. And now, a bunch of suits with Harvard MBAs and no understanding of food were ruining it in the name of margin expansion and quarterly earnings reports. But here is the cruelest twist of all. Sanders could not leave. He could not walk away. He was contractually obligated to serve as the company's honorary chairman and public face. He had to wear that white suit everywhere. He had to smile for the cameras. He had to pretend he still loved KFC. The alternative was breach of contract, lawsuits, and the loss of his lifetime salary. So the old brawler, the man who once shot a competitor over a sign, the man who punched clients in courtrooms and bosses in offices, the man who had never backed down from any fight in his entire life, was now reduced to a mascot, a living, breathing logo, a prisoner in his own white suit, a clown in his own circus. For a few years, he tried to play along. He attended openings. He signed autographs. He told the same stories to the same journalists. He smiled for the same cameras. But inside, he was burning with rage. And eventually, he could not keep it inside any longer. He started talking to reporters off the record. He told them the new gravy was wallpaper paste. He told them the new chicken was fried dough soaked in grease. He told them the company had betrayed everything he stood for. He said, and I quote directly from a 1973 interview, "The most tasteless chicken I have ever eaten. That gravy is a damn disgrace. They don't know how to cook. They don't care how to cook. They only care about the money." These were not the words of a happy retiree enjoying his golden years. These were the words of a man watching his life's work being fed through a wood chipper, piece by piece, while being forced to applaud. And then he tried to do something about it. In 1965, just 1 year after selling the company, he and Claudia opened a new restaurant in Shelbyville, Kentucky. They called it the Claudia Sanders Dinner House, using her name to avoid legal trouble. The plan was simple. Sell the original, unmodified recipe. Sell it the way he had always made it. Sell it without interference from Wall Street accountants and their spreadsheets. The restaurant was beautiful, a white colonial building with red shutters and a warm fireplace. The chicken was perfect, golden brown, crispy, juicy, exactly as he had perfected it. The customers loved it. They drove for hours just to taste the real recipe. But KFC loved it less. They sued him for trademark infringement. Let that sink in. Let that really sink in. The man whose face was on every bucket, whose name was on every sign, whose image was printed on every box, was being sued by his own company for trying to cook his own chicken, using his own recipe, in his own restaurant, in his own hometown. Colonel Sanders versus Kentucky Fried Chicken. The creator versus the creation. The father versus the son. He countersued. The legal battle dragged on for years. Lawyers made fortunes. Sanders spent hours in depositions, his temper flaring, his blood pressure rising, his voice cracking with anger. In his 70s and 80s, the old fighter was still fighting. He was still refusing to back down. He was still punching back. They eventually settled out of court. Sanders agreed to stop using his name in a way that competed with KFC. He received a small payment and a promise from the company that they would respect his legacy. But everyone knew the truth. The promise was meaningless. The damage was done. He had become a stranger in his own story, a footnote in his own biography. He spent the rest of his life as a prisoner to his own brand. He could not escape. He could not speak freely. He could not tell the truth without risking a lawsuit. He could only sit in his white suit, smile his frozen smile, and watch the company he built turn his life's work into a processed food product, generation after generation, year after year, long after he was gone. He died in 1980 of leukemia. He was 90 years old. His last years were filled with bitterness, regret, and the quiet fury of a man who had been eaten by the machine he helped build. His obituaries called him a legend. The company called him a founder. The media called him an icon. But none of them mentioned the gunfight. None of them mentioned the fistfights. None of them mentioned the $2 million heist, or the years of silent suffering, or the lawsuit against his own name. They just showed the white suit and the smile and the bucket. They always show the bucket. Conclusion, the final lesson. The life of Harland Sanders is not some cheap, feel-good fairy tale about how you can succeed at 70 if you just never quit. It is not a sermon about perseverance. It is not a business school case study in successful franchising. It is not an inspirational poster for a middle school classroom. It is a profoundly dark history of the war between a creator and capitalism. It is tragedy dressed up as inspiration. It is a warning wrapped in a bucket of fried chicken. It is a ghost story told in the language of fast food. From the dramatic, chaotic life of this hot-tempered old man, I want you to walk away with two brutal realities. Two truths that no motivational speaker will ever tell you, because they are too uncomfortable, too complicated, too dark for a 10-minute YouTube video that ends with a smile and a call to buy a course. First, the world only rewards those who build systems. If Sanders only knew how to fry chicken, if he only had a recipe and a dream, he would have died a working-class cook. He would have been forgotten. His recipe would have died with him. His name would have been erased by time. It was only when he turned his chicken into a franchise model, a repeatable, scalable, transferable system of contracts and royalties and training manuals and quality checks, that he finally touched the doorknob of true wealth. The product is temporary. The system is forever. You can be the best cook in the world, the best coder in the world, the best writer in the world, the best anything in the world. But if you only cook, if you only code, if you only write, you will only ever be a cook, a coder, a writer. If you want to be a king, you have to build a kingdom. And a kingdom is not made of chicken. It is made of leverage. Second, creating value and defending value are two completely different skill sets. They require different mindsets, different tools, different strategies, different people. Sanders was a master of creation. He could build something out of nothing. He could turn a roadside gas station into a destination. He could turn a secret recipe into a national obsession. He could turn a $105 Social Security check into a 400-location empire. But he was a disaster at defense. He did not understand valuation. He did not understand equity. He did not understand the power of legal contracts. He did not understand that the moment his empire became valuable, smarter, colder, more patient, more ruthless men would come to take it from him. You can possess the greatest craftsmanship in the world. You can have the most astonishing perseverance. You can work harder than anyone alive. You can fight like a wildcat. But if you do not understand the leverage of capital, the power of equity, and the binding nature of legal contracts, the empire you spend a lifetime building can and will be legally robbed by men in tailored suits. They will smile while they do it. They will shake your hand. They will call you partner. They will tell you they respect you. And then they will own everything you built. Capital does not care about your passion. Capital does not care about your struggle. Capital does not care about your dreams. Capital does not care about your gunfight or your rejections or your bankruptcy or your tears. Capital only cares about the balance sheet, the spreadsheet, the return on investment, the quarterly earnings call. Everything else is just noise. That fiery, passionate old rebel died a long time ago in the gears of corporate machinations. He died the moment he signed that contract. Everything after that was just a puppet show. The white suit, the smile, the bucket, the television commercials, the billboards, the plastic statues, all of it. A puppet show. All that remains today is a white, commercialized symbol, a cartoon grandpa, a hollow icon, forced to smile on a cardboard bucket forever, a ghost haunting his own legacy. The next time you bite into a piece of extra crispy chicken, remember the gunfight over the gas station sign. Remember the 1,009 rejections. Remember the $2 million heist. Remember the lawsuit. Remember the old man who sued his own name and lost. Remember the prisoner in the white suit. And ask yourself whether the smiling grandpa on the bucket is a saint, a genius, a hero, a victim, or just another casualty of American capitalism. Ask yourself whether you are building your own empire or just feeding someone else's. Ask yourself what happens when the wolves come for you. Ask yourself if you will be ready. This is AutoArchives. We rip off the sentimental masks. We show you the bleeding truths of business and history. We do not sell chicken soup. We do not sell dreams. We do not sell courses. We sell the truth, and the truth is often bitter, often uncomfortable, often painful. If this story changed your perspective, even a little, even just for a moment, smash the like button. Share it with a friend who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss the next archive. And I will see you in the next one.